LBC weather tonight, many areas turning clearer and cold with a fairly widespread frost, a low of -2. Tomorrow, many northern and eastern areas should stay dry, the southwest turning cloudy and windier, highs of 9 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Andy Ivy.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. During the course of the election campaign, we are doing 2 hour-long interview phone-ins a week with senior politicians. Today, it's the turn of Jeremy Hunt, former Foreign Secretary, obviously from the Conservatives. Welcome.
Good evening, Ian.
I feel I've spent a lot of time with you this year.
Too much time together on the old hustings.
Here's
yes.
another.
You kept smiling, though. That was the important thing. I tried to as well. Not always with success.
Well, we'll come on to that. But let me just remind you, if you'd like to watch our proceedings this evening, you can do so on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk and on the LBC YouTube channel, Facebook page and Twitter feed. And you can see this rather resplendent Duchamp tie that I'm wearing. I don't normally wear ties, but I've been speaking at an important event today, so I haven't taken it off. Right, we're going to talk to you for half an hour and then take calls, if that's all right. Let's just go back to the leadership campaign a moment, because since the end of July, when the result was announced, there must have been moments when you've thought to yourself, well, I wouldn't have done it like that, or I'd have done that differently, or God, I wish I had won. I wouldn't have made that mistake.
Actually, no. I was pretty happy. No, I was pretty happy with the way the leadership campaign panned out, apart from the results. But I thought, I felt I was myself. I think the thing that can go wrong in politics is if you end up articulating a position which is different to your core beliefs, and I think we've all seen politicians who that's happened to over the years, and that didn't happen. I was proud of my team. In retrospect, I think we can see that it was not going to be won by someone who voted Remain in the 2016 referendum.
Did you not realise that at the beginning, though?
I wondered whether it might be possible to turn the tide, and in the end, I think there was a certain drift towards me. But I think having tried someone who was saying they were going to be steady and competent, which was Theresa May's pitch, then someone else saying they're going to be steady and competent was always going to find it, frankly, an uphill struggle. But I actually rather enjoyed myself on the campaign trail, which I wasn't expecting, even in those hustings which you were chairing. Well,
you did seem to enjoy it, and it was interesting that a lot of the undecideds, I know, went out of those hustings supporting you rather than Boris Johnson. But do you feel now that maybe Boris Johnson was just something the Conservative Party needed or needs to get out of its system?
I hope he'll be a great Prime Minister, actually, because we are in a very challenging national situation. There's a need to sort Brexit, move on, bring the country together. And he's quite a Marmite politician, but he has also confounded the sceptics, even confounded me, by getting the backstop removed by the 31st of October. I mean, if I look at the predictions we made about the future, I predicted we wouldn't leave by the 31st of October, 1-0 to me. But Boris got the backstop removed by the 31st of October. I think that was an equaliser. And I think that was impressive. And I want him now to succeed in taking us out of the EU with a deal and healing the divide. Because I think when I knock on doors in southwest Surrey, and by the way, that's one of the nice things about not being in the government, you can spend a lot more time in your constituency. There is this overwhelming desire on all sides of the debate. People just want to get it over with. They want to get it sorted. They want to move on. And they're feeling very, very frustrated.
You talk about unifying the country. One of the ways of unifying the party would have been for you to have served in Boris Johnson's cabinet. Now, you decided not to because he offered you the job of Defence Secretary. You turned it down because you thought that, I'm putting words into your mouth here, feel free to disagree, that Penny Mordaunt shouldn't have been sacked. It was also a demotion. Wouldn't it have been, it's quite odd for a Conservative to turn down the job of Defence Secretary, isn't it?
It's a wonderful job. And I passionately think we need to spend more on defence and, who knows for the future. But during that campaign, I realised at one point that I had been in the cabinet for every hour that each of my 3 kids have been alive. And so I'd love to have stayed on as Foreign Secretary, but if Boris didn't want me to do that, I thought this is actually a moment to take a bit of time out for my family, for my constituency, but actually be a better dad. And, and I've been able to walk my kids to school and things like that, which I just wasn't able to do before.
How has that changed you? Because you're right, being in government for so long, you get used to a certain routine. You get used to the fact that you're here, there and everywhere. You don't have your weekends to yourself. How has that changed you?
Truthfully, I think the big lie for politicians when they're doing big jobs in the cabinet is you persuade yourself, if you're a man, that you're being a good dad because you read the odd story to your kids and you attend the odd school play and you may even clear time at the weekends for them. But you are always busy and there's always something on your mind, even at that weekend time when you should be with your kids. And you don't realise it and you persuade yourself you're doing okay and you're being a good husband, and it's not until you get off the hamster wheel that you realise what it's like actually to spend unpressured time with your family, and that has been very special for me.
You know where this is leading, don't you? I mean, if there's
I think you're going to say, does your Chinese-Japanese wife agree with you? Is she happy to have you at home?
I'm assuming that she is. No. The election result will be announced on the morning of the 13th of December. Boris Johnson will then reform his government. If he rings you up and says, look, I want you in my government now. You've had your 4 months off with your kids. I want you back. Have you thought about what your response will be?
I don't rule out a return to frontline politics, but I'd like to wait a bit longer. I think this is a special moment for me to spend time with the family and with the constituency. But what I want is for Boris to be in a position to form that government. And I do think this election is going to be a lot closer than many people seem to believe reading the papers. I mean, the single thing you have to remember is that there is no party in Parliament that will form an alliance with the Conservatives if we don't get a majority. So if we just got the same number of seats, roughly, that we get now, then the biggest grouping would be Labour, the Lib Dems and the SNP. And whatever the Lib Dems say now, if they were promised a second referendum on Brexit, they would put Corbyn in Downing Street, and we would have the nightmare of not just a Scottish independence referendum, a Brexit referendum, but years of uncertainty. So I do think what we need now is a functional majority so that we can sort out the big issue and get on to all those other things that people want sorted out too.
Now, whenever I interview you, you are incredibly honest in the interviews, and I know from previous interviews you've answered direct questions very directly, and I want you to answer this one directly.
Let's hear it. Come on.
Well, do you remember in the conference in 2017, I said if there's another referendum, would you vote Leave or Remain? And you absolutely shocked me by saying that you would vote Leave, and then of course I asked Theresa May that question, which anyway, we all know what happened there. But no, I think a lot of our listeners will think, well, I wonder what Jeremy Hunt would have been like as Prime Minister. And of course, there is a possibility that the Conservatives could lose the election, that Jeremy Hunt could take over, and the Conservative Party is very ruthless with leaders who fail. If Boris Johnson was forced out, would you stand again?
I'm not going to answer that question because I think we are all... It was a very nice try, a very, very nice try. But we've all got to focus as Conservatives now on the job in hand, which is to get a Conservative majority. And I think, frankly, the discussions that we had in the summer, the he said, she said type discussions, are really not what people are thinking about. What people are worried about is this great country that is famous around the world for the strength of its democratic institutions seems to have got stuck. And that is not what people think Britain should be about. And that's what we have to resolve.
Well, let me put the question a slightly different way, in which I think you could answer this. You wouldn't rule it out. You're not going to say you would, but you're not going to rule it out.
Look, I haven't given up, if that's what you're asking, in terms of coming back in the future at some stage. But I would like, if it ever happened, it to be after a very successful and no doubt colourful Boris Johnson premiership, almost as colourful as your tie, which I think you used a word for it, Duchamp?
It's made by a company called Duchamp.
Oh, okay, right.
I'm not asking for a free tie because I don't accept freebies anyway, but I don't normally wear a tie. No, anyway, enough about me. How many new hospitals are going to be built by the Conservative government, do you think?
Well, we've said 40, and Boris and Matt Hancock have got stick for the fact that the detailed plans have only been announced for 6. But the reality, because I was Health Secretary, I know this, is it takes at least 5 years for a new hospital to come to fruition, sometimes 10 with all the planning processes. So there's a very long funding stream. So by announcing the 40, I think it is a commitment that those 40 places will get new hospitals.
But they're not new hospitals, are they? The 6 are, but the others, they're like a new wing on a hospital. Well, that's by no definition a new hospital, is it?
I don't know. If you were a patient at St Helier Hospital and that, terrible old building was being pulled down and a new building put in its place, I think you'd think it was a new hospital, and I think you'd rejoice because there are lots of very, very old buildings in the NHS.
No, that's true, but if it's just one wing built onto an existing hospital, that's a new wing, it's not a new hospital, and yet they seem to be counting all of these 40 as new hospitals. And that's where the voters think, hang on a second, we're not being told the truth here. It's like Labour's £1.2 trillion worth of extra spending. That's been exposed as being not true. It destroys trust in politics, doesn't it?
Look, there are things I don't agree with the government on. I wish we had announced our reforms for social care, and I hope we'll see those in the manifesto. But on this, the business of actually putting funding into the NHS, I was Health Secretary when we announced an extra 20 billion increase by the 5th year in the annual budget. And the big gap, the thing that I didn't negotiate a couple of years ago, was capital funding. And that is now being released. And I think for people in the NHS, that is a very important thing, because people are saying, yes, I can see there's more money coming in for the day-to-day running of the NHS, which incidentally is what you need for more doctors and more nurses. But the fabric of our buildings is falling down. And I think people are very happy that is beginning to be addressed.
You did secure 20 billion extra. Labour is saying, well, that's not enough. And yet the Tories are saying today that actually Labour's promises of an extra 6 billion don't add up, because if you include the 4-day week, which they want to have, that it would need just another 6.6 billion to cover that. What is the electorate to make of all these claims and counterclaims? Because it is very confusing for people, isn't it?
It is. And unfortunately, one of the legacies of that £350 million slogan on the side of a bus, which we all know was not an accurate figure, is that it's sort of become fashionable in political campaigning to take a figure that you know may not be true and to keep hammering it home and to welcome an argument about it because it's another way of implanting it in people's minds. And I actually don't think that's a healthy type of politics, whichever party does that. But I do think that with respect to the NHS, which is the area I know about the best, it is absolutely true that if you tell all doctors and nurses that you're going to reduce their hours to a 4-day week, then that is going to cost several billions more on the NHS pay bill. And you have to factor that in. And right now, when we have a desperate shortage of doctors and nurses, I think that would be something that's very, very difficult to deliver.
I mean, as you've mentioned, the shortage of doctors and nurses, you promised to train, I think, an extra 6,000 doctors. We now have fewer doctors than a few years ago, do we not?
No. You've asked me an area where I do know the numbers, and what we actually had was a significant increase. I think it was about 17,000 increase in the number of doctors in the NHS while I was Health Secretary. But what we had a decline in was the number of GPs. Yeah. And I knew there was a problem with GPs, and I got more young medical graduates going into general practice, succeeded there. But where I failed was that there was an even bigger increase in the number of older GPs taking early retirement or working a shorter week. So the net number of GPs did actually go down. And that's why I'm very pleased to see this announcement by Matt Hancock, because I think he's going to do something, I hope, a deal with Sajid Javid to deal with this pension issue for doctors, which is causing so many of them to retire early, and we've just got to sort that out.
But it's kind of after the horse has bolted, isn't it? If there's been a reduction in the number of GPs, there's been an increase in the population, an increase in demands on GPs, and yet your government has presided over a period where there's a net loss of GPs.
Well, I have to take responsibility for the fact that despite huge effort, the total number of GPs didn't go up. And I can tell you I tried very hard to make it go the other direction. But I think it's clear that the government has understood that this is a problem we need to sort out, but it is going to take some time.
How did you react when you heard Matt Hancock having a little dig at you over the junior doctors dispute and claiming full credit for solving it?
Well, that was a very difficult dispute, but although I didn't get everything right in that dispute, and I can see that now with the benefit of hindsight.
What didn't you get right?
Well, I didn't communicate my message to the junior doctors. I think I won the argument on the airwaves. I probably won it with the public because I think they all understand the need for 7-day care. Maybe not. But I certainly succeeded in getting the message across on the airwaves, but not with the junior doctors themselves. And I think the reason was that they could see the general shortage of doctors in their wards, and they didn't see what the government plans were to deal with that. And so although we did get the new junior doctors contract in place, and, you know, in technical terms, I won that dispute, I think the important thing that came out of that was me understanding this issue of rota gaps, of doctors turning up to work and seeing there wasn't a full roster of doctors in the workplace. And that was what persuaded me to ask Theresa May to make her first big decision on the NHS when she was Prime Minister, which was that 25% increase in medical training places, which is one of the biggest ever increases. And I think that was probably, in retrospect, the most important outcome of that dispute.
Quick change of subject, because I've got 2 or 3 texts on this subject, so I'll ask the question. Joan says, why don't you ask him, if you dare, how much Russian money is going into the Tory party and why the ISC report is being withheld?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. What I know is when you're Foreign Secretary, you see all the intelligence that comes in through MI6. And of course, Russia's a country about which there is a considerable volume of intelligence. So there could be all sorts of reasons that we don't know about for that delay. And I just don't want to speculate because I don't know what they are.
But we know that the security services have signed it off. We know that the Cabinet Office have signed it off. It is just Number 10 that are saying, no, it can't come out before the election. And I mean, various members of the Intelligence and Security Committee have said that it's ready to go. And so I think everyone is questioning what the motivations would be to hide it.
Well, do we know that? I mean, I don't know that. I haven't.
Well,
read
Dominic
that.
Grieve is the chairman of the
Dominic Grieve,
committee.
Is not someone who is being helpful to the Conservative
but I
cause
think
at
on
the
this, I
moment.
don't think on this issue he would play politics with it, would he?
All I can say is I don't think you or I know what those reasons are. My concern about this particular debate is that it is clouding a much bigger, a much more important debate that we should be talking about in this election campaign, which is what President Macron said last week, namely that NATO is brain dead. I mean, the NATO alliance, which has been the foundation of our freedom for the last 70 years, actually founded under a Labour government, is in a very bad state at the moment. And indeed, that is made even worse by the possibility going through everyone's minds that Britain, the second most important member of that alliance, could be about to have a Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn, who wants NATO shut down. And I think that is frankly, right now, that is the key issue for this election.
Well, he's denied that you're right, in the 1980s and 1990s, there's various clips of him saying that he wants it shut down, but that's not his current position, is it?
Well, he said it in 2014. I mean,
but he wasn't leader then. He's leader now. Surely we have to take notice of what he says as leader.
Well, he said this thing 4 or 5 years ago, and I think we can safely say, given that he's been saying the same thing for all his adult life, that this is actually what he believes. And he's also said that he would never use nuclear weapons. And, Lord West, who was a Labour Defence Minister, said that he doesn't understand the meaning of deterrence. Now, look, we can make all sorts of comments about Jeremy Corbyn's views, but I do think that in terms of the principal things that have kept us safe over very many years, for me, and this was something I reflected on a lot as Foreign Secretary, democracies have to stand together. And in the next 10 years, we could, for the first time in our lifetime, have a situation where the most powerful or the biggest economy in the world is not a democracy if the Chinese economy overtakes the American one. And we're going to need organisations like NATO. And that's why I think we do need to think hard about some of the fundamental tensions, not just the risk of Corbyn, but the fact that American taxpayers are getting pretty fed up by the fact that Europeans are spending about half as much as they do as a proportion of their GDP. And we should be thinking about that.
When you're door knocking in your constituency and somebody says to you, well, OK, we know what the Conservative position is on Brexit, but why else should we vote for you? It's actually quite difficult, I think, for Conservative members who go out canvassing to come up with a coherent argument there. I mean, all that seems to be happening at the moment is you have a Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sajid Javid, who is splashing the cash around like nobody's business in a way that I've never seen a Conservative Chancellor do before. How can you stand on a manifesto that is essentially going to be adopting Ed Balls' economic policy?
Well, let me tell you how I answer that very question, and I did answer it this morning on the streets of Farncombe in my constituency when I was knocking on doors, and the answer is that there is a very simple divide in this election between Labour and the Liberal Democrats, who want a rerun of the Brexit referendum, because the only way they would be able to get into power would be with the SNP. We would also have a rerun of the Scottish independence referendum. We would have years more uncertainty, which would be incredibly damaging for the economy, as against the Conservatives, who have got a good Brexit deal, who will get on with Brexit and then start focusing on these other things, the NHS and the social. No, I'm saying we want to get on with Brexit and put it to one side, sort it out and deal with those other issues. We're not going to have any space to deal with all those other social issues if we have to have another damaging second referendum on Brexit, a Scottish independence referendum. These things will mean we're going to have another 3 years of debate, paralysis.
The slogan of Get Brexit Done, it's a good slogan, but it's not true, is it? Because even if we leave the European Union on the 31st of January or before that, we all know that the next deadline is coming up at the end of December, when if there isn't a free trade agreement, we essentially leave with no deal, kind of. And Boris Johnson said he won't extend that. I think that was a little message to Nigel Farage more than anything. But you would presumably accept that that will have to be extended if the EU hasn't come to an agreement with us by then.
I think you have to keep the possibility of walking away on the table. But actually, I'm very confident that we would get a trade deal, because it's not just us.
In 11 months.
But it's not just us that are saying it. Michel Barnier himself
said it would take 3 years.
He said that he thought it would be possible to get a bare bones deal by the end of next year. He thought it was possible. And I think if he's saying that, this is, remember, someone who doesn't particularly enjoy saying things that we like to hear in the UK, but he thought it was possible, and I think it is possible. And I think there's a huge difference between leaving the EU at the end of January with a deal and the prospect of a trade deal in relatively short order, and further paralysis where people don't know if we're in or we're out. We have another huge referendum campaign on Brexit, another one on Scottish independence. I think we would have 2-3 more years of chaos, and I just don't think people want that.
But aren't we going to have, isn't 2020 going to be Groundhog Year, where we have a repeat of the argument that you and Boris Johnson had in the leadership election, where you said, well, 31st of October, yeah, let's hope we can get out of them, but I'm not going to die in a ditch. I'm not sure you actually said those words, but the equivalent, if it takes a few extra weeks. And Boris Johnson said, no, we've got to do it by then. That's exactly what's going to happen, isn't it? With this December date, he's going to say, we've got to leave by then, and if we don't leave by then, we'll leave anyway. And you and others on the Tory benches will say, well, actually, a month or two, is that really going to make any great difference? And we're going to have the same arguments throughout 2020, aren't we?
I hope not. And the reason I hope not is because if Conservatives have a majority, then we will be able to deliver Parliament. The reason we had those arguments in the summer, and I had that debate with Boris Johnson in the summer, was because we didn't have a majority, and therefore I didn't feel confident that we would be able to get Parliament over the line, and sadly that was proved right in the end. But if we get a majority on December the 12th, then we will be able to deliver the deal. It's not a question of leaving without a deal, it's leaving with a deal that's been negotiated without that backstop. And that, I think, will be a big step forward, and we can move to the next stage, which is to get this trade deal sorted.
But you would be happy to stand on a manifesto that expressly said that at the end of December 2020, the end of the transition period, that's it, we'd leave even if a free trade deal hadn't been finalised by then?
Yes, but it doesn't mean that I think we would leave without a deal.
We might. And you surely wouldn't be in favour of that.
Well, when I was in the Cabinet and in the leadership campaign and after the leadership campaign, I was someone who always believed that to get a deal, you have to leave no deal on the table. And I think the same is true now. And I think Boris, in fairness and against scepticism by people like me, Boris did actually deliver that change to the deal, getting rid of the backstop. And so I think we've got every reason to think that he might be able to get us a decent trade deal by the end of next year.
If you were still in the Foreign Office, would you expect to be debating with Emily Thornberry during this election?
I would welcome the chance to debate with Emily Thornberry, especially having heard her rather lamentable defence of Jeremy Corbyn in the TV studios over the last couple of days. I think she's got... I used to say being Health Secretary was one of the most difficult jobs in politics, but being Shadow Foreign Secretary and having to defend a Labour leader who has said that he would never use nuclear weapons, thereby completely invalidating our deterrent, which has been the foundation of our security, I think is a pretty difficult job.
But I ask you that because apparently Sajid Javid is not going to be debating with John McDonnell. I think the truth of it is he wants to do it, and Number 10 have told him that he can't do it. Surely election campaigns are all about debating your political opponents so the country can decide which version of events they want to go with.
Yes, and I always welcome debates. And as you know, in the leadership campaign, I was keen to have rather more of them than we actually had.
I do remember
that. But look, I don't know the ins and outs of it. But I think that if he did have a debate, Saj would do a pretty good job.
Given your experience of Boris Johnson doing that campaign, how do you think he's going to do in debates with Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, he, I think, will put across his case very forcefully that this is a moment of choice, whether we move on or whether we carry on with the same old paralysis. And I think that Jeremy Corbyn needs to be held to account for that. I think it's very important for all of us to see those debates happening.
What's the biggest issue that you can identify, either as Health Secretary or Foreign Secretary, that the UK hasn't done enough about? I mean, looking back on your 9 years in government, what do you think in those two offices we just haven't got right?
Well, I would pick two things probably. One of them from those areas, which is the social care system. Because in the end, you aren't going to relieve pressure on the NHS unless you do something about the social care system, because we need to be better at looking after older people in their own homes so they don't need to go to A&Es at 9 o'clock on a Friday night. And that has just taken too long. I wanted to do it as the next thing I did after negotiating the extra money for the NHS. In fact, I tried to do it at the same time, but the Treasury wouldn't have it, so it was next on my list. I know Matt Hancock has been trying very hard, but I really do think we've got to do something about that. That's one. The second one is actually in a different area, but I did mention it a bit in the leadership campaign. I think we still have too many young people leaving school not able to read or write properly. And I think as the party of opportunity for everyone, we really should be able to say that after 11 years of state education, every single child is leaving school properly able to read. And I would like to see us commit to that. At the moment, we don't even collect proper statistics, but we know there are 7.5 million adults in this country who can't read a medicine label. And I just think we should do something about it.
That's enough questions from me. It's over to you now. 0345 6060 973. That's the number to call if you'd like to put a question to Jeremy Hunt. He's here with me until 9. It's 8:31. Andy Ivey has the news headlines.
A half-brother and sister who were in an incestuous relationship have been jailed for life for killing their two sons. The pair from Sheffield also planned to murder their 4 other children over fears they were going to be taken into care. Another 100 armed forces personnel are being sent to help with the flood relief efforts in Yorkshire and the East Midlands. The Environment Agency has this evening downgraded all the severe danger to life flood warnings along the River Don in South Yorkshire. 2 men in their 20s have been arrested in East London on suspicion of terrorism offences. Police are searching 2 homes and a commercial premises. LBC weather tonight, many areas turning clear and cold with a fairly widespread frost, a low of -2. Tomorrow, many northern and eastern parts should stay dry. The southwest turning cloudy and windier, highs of 9 degrees.
This is LBC.
Welcome back, Mr. Jones. How was your Touareg 48-hour test drive? Mr. Jones, I said, how was the test drive?
Fantastic, thank you.
What did you make of the Touareg's touchscreen Innovision cockpit?
Brilliant.
And the climate control massage seats?
Oh, marvellous.
How about the night vision camera?
Absolutely exceptional.
That's great. So, are you going to unlock the door?
No.
The Volkswagen Touareg 48-hour test drive. The hardest part will be giving it back.
Come on, Mr. Jones, open up.
Can't hear you.
Participating retailers only, subject to status, vehicle availability and retailer T&Cs. And 17th of December 2019.
This winter, why not take the short flight from London to Dublin with Aer Lingus from just $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. From coastal walks to cosy pubs and friendly locals, you'll find so much to enjoy once you're there. Smart takes a Dublin city break. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at aerlingus.com. Terms and conditions apply.
And now we go live to Tyrrell Farm.
Down here in Herefordshire, the folks are busy bringing in a bumper crop of local spuds. And of course, when you have the finest potatoes, only the tastiest ingredients will do. That's where the tasting team come in.
Big chilli coming through.
All this ensures their crisps taste ruddy-licious. In fact, the Tyrrell's team have done such a spiffing job, people across the land are calling their crisps terribly, terribly tasty.
Coffee shop, cashback, cat flaps, cashback, beanbags, rucksack, hire car, buy a car, flapjack, cashback, dumbbells, cashback, takeaway, holiday to anywhere the sun is at, bum bag, laptop, big match, hatchback, binge watching, paintballing, crab fishing, cashback, anything you want to buy, everywhere you want to go. Guess what? Cashback. Whatever you spend your money on, get money back every time with the American Express Platinum Cashback Everyday Credit Card. Search Amex Cashback. Representative 22.9% APR variable. Minimum annual spend to receive cashback. Terms apply. 18 plus subject to approval.
Esso customers, remember, you can collect Nectar points on fuel, in the shop, and when you use the Esso app. Ahoy there, Captain Rubberlegs. Pump number 5, gentlemen in waders. Since you haven't caught any fish, how about catching a train? You've got enough Nectar points now and you've been angling for a reason to get away. You can even take a net. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Earn on the things you need, spend on the things you want. Esso Nectar, helping fuel your everyday. Available at participating Esso sites. For more information, visit esso.co.uk.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
8:35. Your questions to Jeremy Hunt. You can watch us on YouTube or on the LBC YouTube channel, Facebook page, Twitter feed, or at lbc.co.uk. Warren is in Rugby. Hello, Warren.
Hi, Ian.
Hello, Warren.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. What would you like to ask?
I was asked Jeremy Hunt this particular question. If Jeremy Corbyn got into power, God forbid, and he cancelled Trident, what would that effect have on the nuclear deterrent of Britain, our standing in the world, and also would it encourage Vladimir Putin to put more aircraft into British airspace and also his warships into British waters to test our resolve?
Well, Warren, I'm very pleased you asked that question. The truth is that
there'll be some tougher ones than that.
Well, I'm pleased you asked it because I think we should be talking about this. Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't even have to cancel Trident to make our nuclear deterrent redundant because he's already said he wouldn't use it. And the whole point about a nuclear deterrent is that you keep your opponent guessing as to whether you would respond if they used a nuclear weapon on you. In fact, that's the first job a new Prime Minister has to do, is to write top secret letters to the commanders of our nuclear submarines as to what they should do in the event of a first strike against the UK. But we know what Corbyn would do because he said so. And your point about Putin is well made. I think the concern is that Russia is becoming much more aggressive in the way that the Soviet Union was in the 1980s, and we need to recognise the world is changing. So I personally think this is the time when we should be strengthening our alliances with other democracies, not undermining them in the way that I'm afraid Jeremy Corbyn would do.
Warren, any response?
No, I was hoping he would say that because I think really we tend to forget with the general election it seems to be all about Brexit. We've got to think about the next 5 years is what's going to happen as well. And I'm afraid that the appeasement possibly which is on the table, I'm afraid I'm not looking forward to if Mr Corbyn came into power.
OK, thank you, Warren. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask a question to Jeremy Hunt. Simon's in Orpington. Simon, go ahead.
Yeah, hello, gents. Jeremy, my question for you is I'm probably inclined to vote Conservative at the election, but I have a real sticking point, and that's the Northern Irish custom arrangements under the New Deal. So could you just clarify the situation in terms of the customs checks, the declarations and the single market alignment?
Sure. So the first thing, Simon, is that Northern Ireland, under this new Brexit deal, will benefit from the reductions in tariffs that we're hoping to get with trade deals that are signed with other countries around the world. So if we if we do a deal, for example, with Australia, that means that the tariffs on certain types of fruit or meat or whatever are reduced, then consumers in Northern Ireland would benefit from that as well. But we also have to recognise that the history of the island of Ireland is different. There have been the Troubles, and therefore we have to take account of the fact that the nationalist minority on Northern Ireland want completely frictionless border and to be able to go to and from just as if it was one country. And that means that we have agreed there will be some alignment of single market regulations on the island of Ireland. I personally think that will be good for businesses in Northern Ireland, but I think it recognises the historic differences as well as meaning that they can benefit from Brexit.
But when you were in Theresa May's cabinet, she said no Prime Minister could accept a border down the Irish Sea, and that's exactly what Boris Johnson has done.
I don't think he has, because what she was saying is that she couldn't accept a situation where there will be different customs tariffs in Northern Ireland compared to the rest of the UK, and there won't be.
Simon, happy?
Not completely, no, Jeremy, thanks for the answer. But I did ask about the customs declarations for Northern Ireland, and I think this is where the confusion is, because Stephen Barclay said that there wouldn't be any customs declarations, and then later had to correct himself and say there would be. Boris Johnson was caught on video saying that he was the Prime Minister and there wouldn't be. Kwasi Kwarteng said at the weekend he doesn't believe there will be. So, again, could you just clarify, are they going to be doing customs declarations with the mainland? Because Sammy Wilson at the moment is saying that this deal is a breach of the government's commitment to allow Northern Ireland unfettered access with the mainland. So are there declarations or are there not, Jeremy?
As I understand it, and I haven't been involved in the detail of this.
But Jeremy, this is the deal, because I want to vote with confidence. So as I understand it, isn't really helping me at this stage. Kwasi Kwarteng has used those same words, as I understand it. Can you not just tell people, because it is important for a lot of us?
Well, I'm being truthful, Simon. I haven't been involved in the details of this, and I think you just want me to tell you what I think is going to be the case, and this is what I was about to do.
No, I'm looking for a definitive answer. But
well, will you let me answer it, Simon? That. Will you let me try and answer it anyway? Is that okay? I think there will be some additional bureaucracy, which I hope will be very minimal because it can be done electronically for goods flowing between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. And I hope it'll be invisible. But I think there will be some additional bureaucracy that has to happen. But in return for that, businesses in Northern Ireland will be able to benefit from completely frictionless access to the whole of the European single market. So I think on balance, it'll be something that works well for businesses in Northern Ireland.
Why does this particular thing matter so much to you, Simon?
I just think the union is really, really, really important to us. And this is why I think, a lot of people aren't talking about this in terms of the deal. So that's why I'm talking about it.
OK, Simon, thank you. Let's go to Glenn, who's a new caller in Bexhill-on-Sea. Glenn, what's your question, please?
Alan, thank you for taking my call, and Jeremy. Your party have talked about a huge increase in doctors and nurses. As an existing head of procurement within the NHS, our biggest cost is agency staff. I would like to know. Well, I've got loads of questions, but you asked me to come out with the first one. How are you going to recruit these people that currently we are unable to recruit?
It's a very important question, Glyn, and in the long run, the only way that you can increase the supply of doctors and nurses is to train more of the doctors and nurses that we actually need. And we have not been training as many as we should, and that has now changed, and we've had big increases in the training places. But it does take 7 years for someone to become a doctor, 3 years for them to become a nurse. So it is going to take a while. And as we wait for those new doctors and nurses to come through the system, there's a lot that you can do as a procurement manager to reduce dependence on agency staff, in particular by talking to neighbouring NHS trusts. And you may be doing this already, but agreeing that you're not going to pay above a reasonable rate for agency staff so that they can't play you off against your neighbouring trusts. And I think that NHS trusts have been getting much better at this.
We've been doing that for years. Sorry, I'm sorry to talk across you. We have been doing that for years. We don't pay above the cap rates. We have not paid above the cap rates. Ever since the caps came in, we still struggle to recruit people because they don't want to come and work for what we are prepared to, for what the NHS, the government are prepared to pay. My question is, how are you going to recruit them, not train them?
Well, the only way that you can there's only two ways that you can get extra doctors and nurses into our system. One of them is by training more, and the other is by allowing more to come from overseas. And that's why I think the NHS visa that was announced last week should help you, because it should make it easier when we need to recruit doctors and nurses from overseas to do so.
Well, I hope so, because it isn't about the training. The training is not a problem. Everybody's happy to be trained. It's about the recruitment. I mean, I could go on with other questions, and I've got a whole list. Backlog maintenance.
I would love to let you, Glyn, but I do have to let other callers on as well. Are you okay?
I understand. Could I just very quickly?
Go on.
We have a number of organisations, NHSI/NHSE, and NHS Improvement and NHS England, which are there to regulate what we do, to see that we do everything properly. It has become an industry. We are instructed to recruit consultants at ridiculous amounts of money to basically ask us the questions and then write a report to regurgitate the information that we've given them, and it just seems that it's a tick box exercise for an awful lot of the time, which frustrates me and my colleagues within the NHS that are dedicated people, as is everybody. Nobody works in the NHS for the money. Okay, no one works within the NHS for the money. They do it because they care about what they do, and they see the money that is spent on the consultancy and these industries that seem to have popped up to tell us how to do our jobs, and you get very, very disappointed. We get very
all right, Glyn.
demoralised.
Let me give a quick answer to that.
Point, sure.
I mean, look, I actually have a lot of sympathy for what you're saying there, and a mea culpa from me is that I think the regulatory landscape introduced by the 2012 Health and Social Care Act was way too complicated. And I think that's led to some of the problems that you've talked about. I would like to see NHS England and NHS Improvement merged. I think it'd be a lot simpler for people like you. That's starting to happen. And I hope we can have an Act of Parliament, an NHS Act, that makes that happen.
I'm going to read this text out because I think it'll mean something to the person that sent it. It says, "Hi Jeremy, you sent a very kind letter in response to an issue with Buckinghamshire NHS when we lost our son when you were in office. We never have any contact with politicians, and even our local MP was useless. But Jeremy took the effort to write, which meant a lot. If you could thank him for his support, he would make a great PM for sure, and I'm not a Tory voter normally." So that's a nice text, isn't it? I could read you out a few others, but...
Thank you very much, whoever sent that in. That means a lot.
We will come to some more calls to Jeremy Hunt in just a moment. It's 8:46.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast, LBC.
Nigel Farage saying that he will stand down Brexit Party candidates where Conservatives were successful last time, over 300 seats. But most so-called experts say it might not be enough. Robert Wheel was due to contest the Arundel and South Downs constituency for the Brexit Party.
It was made very clear when I joined that we will put country before party, and that if Farage managed to arrange a deal with Boris Johnson, that we'd stand down and support him.
And you're happy then to stand aside?
No. What we have here is absolute codswallop.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast, weekday mornings from 7, LBC.
A credit limit of up to £1,500. What do you have to do to get it? Simple. Get online and check if you're eligible for an Ocean credit card in minutes without affecting your credit score. For your Ocean credit card, visit ocean.co.uk now and get all that from Ocean. Intelligent Lending Limited is a credit broker. Capital One, the exclusive lender. Representative 39.9% APR variable. Borrow and spend responsibly.
My name's Luke. I live in Dunstable with my wife and 4 daughters. We've got a Ring doorbell too out the front. Every time there's someone who comes up to the door, it notifies my phone, and then I can actually see if there's anyone dodgy at the door. A while ago, we had an incident at the house. My wife and I was in bed about 1:30 in the morning. We got a notification on my Ring app on my phone. So I looked on the actual video itself, and it showed me that he was trying to get underneath the mat to see if there was a key there so he can actually get into the house. The video clip allowed the police to see exactly who was in front of the camera and where that person was touching the door, and that allowed the crime scene technician to dust for prints. Thanks to the video clip and his fingerprints, that was enough to convict him. The most important thing for me is when I'm not here during the night, I need to know that the family's safe, and Ring Doorbell does that.
Join Luke and the millions of people protecting their homes with Ring. Learn more at ring.com.
Make their Christmas wishes come true. Whether they want to jet off on Barbie's dream plane, run with the storm in Fortnite, or glide along on My Lovely Llama. At littlewoods.com, you'll find all the toys they love, all with inclusive delivery and free returns. Own Christmas. Shop now at littlewoods.com.
It's your Stand By Me station. Your You to Me Are Everything station. And, of course, your Easy Like a Sunday Morning station.
Easy like Sunday morning.
That's the sound of LBC's sister station, Smooth Radio. Listen on your radio, on Global Player, or ask your smart speaker to play Smooth.
Oh, I can't wait for Mexico.
I can't wait to swim in underground lakes.
Hike to Chichen Itza.
See the canyons.
And I've booked us a boat trip in Celestin to see the flamingos, which I paid for using the points on my Amex Gold card.
Wow, flamingos. Do you think I can take one home with me?
Points are worth more when you can spend them on what really matters to you. That's why with the American Express Gold Card, you can use your membership rewards points for almost anything. Search Amex Gold. Representative 57.6% APR variable. Annual fee applies after the first year. Terms apply. 18 plus. Subject to approval.
Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 11 minutes to 9. After 9, we're going to be talking about flooding and whether there is a north-south divide, as Jeremy Corbyn has been suggesting today. He says that if these floods had happened in Surrey, there'd have been a very different reaction from the government. Well, it's an easy accusation to make. Do you think there is some truth to it or not? We might give you a little treat as well and replay the interview, the rather car crash interview I did with Weira Hobhouse, and we might play that again, just for a bit of fun. Right, if you'd like to ask Jeremy Hunt a question, we have another 10 minutes with him. Let's go to Kay, who is in Acton. Hello, Kay.
Hi, Ian. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Kay.
I've got two questions. If I'll be quick as possible. So basically, my question is to do with your term as Health Secretary of this country. There's two aspects to your reign which I'm really concerned about, and one is under your reign as the Health Secretary, we've had more A&E closures than any other Health Secretary, as far as I'm aware. And I did call in a week ago to share experience that I went to an A&E last year because I had a sprayed ankle, and the waiting time was 8 hours. And I was healthy enough to obviously go to a walking centre the next day and stuff. However, obviously there's people in this country that have probably thousands of stories where they've experienced a worse experience of the NHS. And it's nothing to do with the workers who work there, but obviously that's something that happened under your reign. I just wanted, if you can kind of share your thoughts about that. And the second quick question I've got is, under your reign as Health Secretary, you had junior doctors go on strike. And obviously, as far as I'm aware, that's the first time doctors went on strike since the NHS was created. And I'm just wondering, obviously, your role you're not in that role now. However, how do you feel about that? Because obviously that's something that's quite a massive statement to have doctors go on strike. These are people who put their lives at risk every day to make sure other people's lives are,
okay.
are taken care of.
We did kind of cover that a little bit earlier in the hour, Kay, but Jeremy?
Sure. I mean, I don't think there were more A&E closures. In fact, I stopped quite a few A&E closures, and there was a big increase in the number of doctors working in A&E departments. But they did get more crowded because we had a big increase in demand, lots more people turning up, and that's why we need to increase capacity.
Shouldn't you have foreseen that?
Well, we did put more doctors into A&E departments. Yeah, I think we should have been thinking much earlier about increasing capacity in the NHS, but that goes back decades. And I think that's one of the big lessons, is the need for long-term workforce planning. I think governments on all sides have been guilty of not doing that properly. But on the junior doctor strike, let me just say this to you, Kay. I did push through some difficult reforms. I don't pretend that I always got it right. I had to deal with mid-staffs and some really big issues about the quality of hospital care. And by the time I finished as Health Secretary, 2.7 million more people were using good or outstanding hospitals. So I think the thrust of the changes that I made...
Jeremy, you're such a professional. You've left your phone on, honestly.
There we are. I'm just turning it off, Kay, because there we are.
Isn't it funny how you can never actually turn a phone off? There's something inbuilt into the... Anyway, carry on.
So, anyway... This is actually a very important topic.
Who was it, by the way?
I'll leave that off air. This is a very important topic that Kay raised, and I think the truth is there were some difficult reforms. I think we did make some progress, but I don't pretend I got everything right.
Kay, quick response.
I that's the normal politician's kind of answer. I'm asking for a human answer, because obviously you're out of the job now, and these type of things, it's when you've got, I've got friends who are doctors, and they wouldn't come. They're not allowed to come on air to share their views about your term as health secretary. However, it's great that you say some things worked well, some things worked right. I generally just want a genuine response from a.
Well, I think that was pretty genuine. I didn't defend to the hilt every single thing I did. I think I said earlier in the show that I didn't get my message across to junior doctors as effectively as I should. But the thrust of what I was trying to do was to improve the standards of care for patients, and I think some progress was made. So I tried to give you what I thought was a fair answer, actually, not a politician's answer. But I don't think I'm going to win you over tonight, Kay.
Kay, thank you. Let's go to Alex in Finchley. Alex, what's your question?
Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Alex.
My question is I don't trust Boris Johnson, because he makes a lot of outlandish promises which he knows he cannot keep, and which he's done both in his personal life and to us as potential voters for the Conservatives. How can we possibly trust this man? And on the second part, would you trust him to lead us as Prime Minister when he's dealing with the likes of Vladimir Putin and Chinese leaders who are undoubtedly have more gravitas than Boris does?
Well, Alex, I just say this. Look, I stood against Boris. I think I know him pretty well. And, of course, he's a colourful leader. He's quite a Marmite leader. Either people love him or they hate him. But sometimes very challenging times need someone different. And I think, on the most important things that he committed to, one of them was that he was going to get us a deal to leave the European Union by the end of October, and he did. We didn't manage to get it through Parliament, but he delivered a deal. Many people thought he wouldn't do that. So I think we have to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think also we have to remember that this isn't just a choice about Boris Johnson. It's a choice between only two people who could be the next Prime Minister. And you have to compare Boris Johnson, who is a human being, who's, I'm sure, the first to say is not perfect, with Jeremy Corbyn, who is the most extreme candidate we've had for Prime Minister in our lifetime. And I think most people find that a very sobering choice.
But I think what Alex is referring to, maybe, is the article that Nick Bowles, your former colleague, wrote in the Evening Standard yesterday, where he says that Boris Johnson has an all-consuming ego, utterly without conscience. He's a compulsive liar who's betrayed every single person he's ever had any dealings with, every woman who's ever loved him, every member of his family, every friend, every colleague, every employee, every constituent. You don't get much more damning than that, do you?
Well, it's very strong language, but it's also not the whole story, is it? He was a very successful mayor of London. He delivered the Olympics with me, and he won London, which is a city that typically votes Labour, with an approach that was very inclusive, very successful. I think London flourished when he was mayor, and so I think you have to look at these things in the round.
But what do you say to, and there's been several people who've texted in tonight to say, well, look, Jeremy Hunt is obviously a nice guy, a man of integrity. And what does it say about the Conservative Party membership when they don't vote for you, but they vote for somebody that Nick Bowles can call all those things?
A third of them did vote for me.
A third of them did vote for you.
But I think the 2/3, the main reason that they voted for Boris was because they wanted Brexit sorted quickly, and they recognised that Boris was someone who led the Brexit campaign. And I think the country now is saying, for goodness sake, we've just got to get this sorted and start talking about other things, because this Brexit debate has been going on now for 3 years. And I think that is, if you don't want to talk about the personalities who could become Prime Minister, that is the choice when it comes to issues.
Do you think in retrospect you might have been a bit more direct in your criticism of Boris Johnson during the contest? Because you obliquely did question his trustability, is that a word, or all that sort of thing. And there were various points in the campaign where you were actually you were a little direct on Boris, but do you think you should have gone further? Would that have affected the result?
Well, I decided right at the outset that people did not want to have a competition where people made personal insults against the other candidate. I did criticise Boris when he didn't show up for the TV debates early in the campaign, because I think he should have. But I don't think that would have done the Conservative Party any favours.
Jeremy, we've come to the end of our time. We've got a lot more questions we could have put to you, but thank you very much indeed for joining us over the last hour.
Thank you.
Coming up by the way, if you've missed any of that, it'll be on the Cross Question podcast, and the whole thing is available right now on the LBC YouTube channel. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to return to the other big news story of the day, flooding. What do you make of the government's response to the flooding in South Yorkshire and Derbyshire so far? Is it a national emergency? The Liberal Democrats have promised to spend an extra £5 billion on flood defences, although when I talked to their environment spokeswoman earlier on, she didn't seem to quite know what that would be spent on. We're going to treat you to a replay of that interview in just a second. If you missed it, don't go away from your radio, because I promise you, it's a bit of a corker.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, a couple who murdered their 2 teenage sons and plotted to